This? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Sure, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. I am Atharv, the Secretary of Design Club IIT Delhi, and today we are hosting this session on Introduction to UI UX with Maanik Sinha. Maanik is currently a product design lead at Airtel, and this session is in collaboration with ADPList. So,
Yeah.
we can start now. Yeah.
Hey everyone, hello. I hope you guys are doing well. So I'll start by introducing myself. Uh, I'm Maanik Sinha. I am currently working as a design lead at Airtel, and I really look into the entertainment side at Airtel, which basically is the music app, which basically allow users to listen to music, and then there is Airtel Extreme, which basically allow users to consume OTT content right from their phone to the large screen TVs, and also the gaming section, which is quite fairly new at Airtel. But yes, we will soon be launching an Airtel gaming app about in 3 months, and these are the basically three verticals that I lead. And like consumer app, there are also the partner apps to it, where vendors like Z or Star Plus, they upload their content and their music like that. uh, I'll tell you a little bit about my whole journey, how I started and what I'm doing right now. So I started as an engineer, like I was talking about initially. I started as an engineer. I was working with companies like Infosys, and I worked about 3 years working on Android apps, iOS apps, a lot of apps, like, and I was also worked on React, Angular, and whatnot. And that was a time I worked for 3 years. I was looking for something new. What can I do better? What would be the next step in my life? What can I take it? I want to study as well, so I wanted to do something which will help my creative side as well. And I was very passionate about photography. That was a time when I actually got a chance to get into photography, get into NID and study photography there. And spending those 2 to 3 years in NID, actually, though I was studying photography, but it helped me understand design in a very different way. I wasn't actually attending any design lectures, but I was interacting with a lot of people at the institute, which basically enabled me to take design as the part of my life. When I finished my graduation at an IDI, I practiced photography for about a year, where I was working with a lot of self projects and a lot of sponsored projects from UNHCR, and I was working with refugees, migrants, documenting their life, their problems. But after a year or so, I realized that I need money to survive, right? And you also understand, everyone will agree on this, that photography, at least in India, does not give you a very stable job anywhere. So at that point of time, I went to do very strong introspection, trying to understand what are all my skills and what can I do. And at that point, I realized I always like problem solving as a core. Even when I was a developer, I was solving problem for the technical clients. When I was photographing, I was looking at the problems for these migrants and refugees and trying my best that to communicate this problem to people so that this problem can be solved. And there is the point. At this point, I realized I can go and maybe try something in UX. And fortunately, I got a chance to work with companies like Paytm, Urban Company. And right now, I'm working with Airtel, where I not only practice UX, but I learned also on the way. So the complete reason behind telling this kind of a story, and especially about myself, is to just lay the context that no matter where you come from, you can, if you have a problem solving skill in you, you can become a UX designer. So having said that, I'll try to explain, or maybe just give a little brief definition about what UI UX is all about. So if I try to define UX is nothing but a process to discover user needs, understand the user and understand his pain points, and basically enable him to complete his process, complete his task, provide a solution to it. Keeping in mind that the product is usable enough and accessible enough that the user is able to complete its process. And then if I talk about UI at a very first level, it talks about the look and feel, the presentation, and basically the interactivity of the product, how the end user will interact with it. And the whole effort goes into making it as intuitive as possible, considering every kind of visual or interactive thing that the user might want to encounter with. Let it be buttons, let it be images, let it be anything. Next question arises that how does UI and UX work together? If I talk from a corporate perspective, working at a company, so no matter what, a final outcome or a final product matters, right? Without a good final product, no company can stand its own chance. To make a final product impactful, UX and UI needs to come together. There is no other way. Basically, UX has to solve the problem. For example, let's take an example of maybe a food delivery company. So, talking from a UX perspective, the process of food delivery, where you select a particular item, you decide that I want to buy it or not, and then estimating that where it will be delivered, how much money will be. The whole process has to be simplified, and all the information that the person requires to deliver to get to basically make a choice that how will the food look like, will it taste good or not, have other people eaten it or not, what do other people say about the same restaurant or the same food. Those things are basically taken care by a UX designer, and then making sure that these information are easily accessible to the user, that whatever he's looking for example ratings, if it's there or not, how if they are noticeable enough or not. And specifically if I talk about food ordering journey, the images of the food, it has to be calling, it has to be that transparent that the user should actually look at the food and understand this is what I want to eat. So there's a very strong coupling between UI and UX that comes together to basically make an impactful product. There is no other way, only if they work together they can reach the same goal. So I actually wanted to make this complete session a little more actionable, where I thought to keep there are a lot of content available online. If you Google it, you will find what is UI, what is UX, what's the design process. There's a lot of things available like that. I thought maybe if we can talk about how to start a career as a UI UX designer. I assume that a lot of people in the audience are from the fourth year or third year of the college, and they are usually thinking about how can they basically start their own career. Uh, so let's see how can there are some things or some cheat sheet I'll say that I have compiled of that maybe can be helpful to basically crack that particular job at UX. To start with, very specific thing that you need is no doubt industry specific knowledge. This is something which is uncompromisable. Unfortunately, you will have to go and learn UI UX, and there are actually a lot of courses available online. You can just Google. There are courses on Udemy. There are courses on Coursera. There are a lot of mentorship programs also available. Like someone like ADPList, they can help you with a mentor, and a mentor can then teach you throughout the design process and make sure that you understand and you learn and you get passionate about it. So this is something which is non-compromisable. You have to get the UI UX knowledge at no cost. Then second thing is that you have to research more about UI UX. It cannot be just uh, the knowledge that you learn from maybe Coursera or maybe any academic knowledge. You have to do your own research. You have to read blogs. You have to read case studies to understand how the UI UX function in the industry at the very core level. And then there's always matter of time. How fast do you want to learn it? The only answer to it, increase your passive learning. To increase your passive learning, one of the uh, a very easy thing is to start listening to podcasts. There are a lot of podcasts available like UI Breakfast or Design Yourself or Design to Conversation, which actually enables you or which exposes you to you to the companies and the designers who are working there, and actually think about the practical scenarios where the design is being implemented, where they're using UX, their knowledge of own UX design to basically reach a business outcome. You can also watch a lot of TED Talks. There are a lot of TED Talks available, maybe from Don Norman and whatnot, all industry leaders. But while you're doing the research, there are a few things that you really need to think about. You really need to be very conscious about, maybe try answering few questions like, why do you want to start a career in this field? What is the reason behind it? What do you like? What do you enjoy the most in the design process? Right? Maybe you are someone who would want to have very strong passionate about research, or maybe as someone who has very strong passion about designing the particular UI, or maybe something else. So you think about your strength and weaknesses while you are doing your complete research about how the design is functioning in the industry. Next thing is becoming a proficient designer. So sounds quite complicated, but it starts quite easily. So becoming a proficient means that you need to be very handy with the tools, or whatever tools that are being used in the industries. For example, Figma or Sketch or Adobe XD. And also you have to be very handy with your own design process. Question arises that how can you become a proficient? A simple cheat that I follow is copy, change, and create. Very first thing that you start looking at websites like Dribble, Behance, and there are a lot more websites where portfolios are being showcased, or even the apps that you like Uber or maybe Swiggy or Zomato, like the daily apps that we use. If you like anything, any screen, any flow, try copying it at the very first stage. But don't copy it mindlessly. Whenever you're copying, also try to question why is this being done, or how is this being done. For example, if you see a tag maybe somewhere at Swiggy where they say that the delivery might be delayed, try to understand why have they put it there. Simple answer can be that it is one of those points where people get anxious about, that where is my food? So why don't show a timer on it? The moment you will start understanding all these, next step comes change. Change as in, when you start looking at these kind of products, where you start basically copying them, then you start using your own side of thought to it. When you realize that there is something more that you can contribute, you can look at a lot of problems. Very basic problems can be maybe on the login screen itself. Maybe the errors are not right. How can you contribute? How can you make it better? Once you have these two steps, when you have copied a lot, when you have made your input, made your own input to these copies, at that point you will be enabled enough to create your own thing from the scratch. That is the point when you will start making case studies or making anything for your own portfolio. Uh, Now let's talk about portfolio. Uh, One of the biggest problem that any designer come across while applying a job is to create a portfolio, right? And portfolio is basically nothing but more like a digital resume that you share with your recruiters, and this is the first thing that any recruiter will look at before even inviting you to the very first round. But I very specifically used the word design while saying designing your portfolio. You don't create, you actually design it. That means that you have to introduce your complete design process when you are creating your portfolio. Very first step is considering your recruiter as your own end users. as a user who will be looking at your product, where your product is a portfolio. The whole reason behind that, they also want to hire you. They are looking for people who have done good job, and they're just out there, that they're looking for it. You just have to sell your product, sell your portfolio to them. When you consider them as your end user, you have to understand what a usual life cycle of this person might look like. You can assume a lot of things. You can assume that this person might be busy in a lot of other tasks as well, and he might not have that much of time to look at each and every portfolio so in depth and understand that who is doing a better job. And also, this guy might have been bombarded with hundreds of portfolios, hundreds of resume. How will he differentiate which one to pick? When you start thinking about these questions, the only answer is that you have to keep your case studies or keep your portfolio simple. When I say simple, I mean don't share too many projects. A lot of time people at this stage, they add any number of projects in their portfolio just to show that they have done a very variety of jobs. That's not the right way. Share only the project which you think are worthy enough, even if it's just two or three, does not matter. If you think that you have done your best job, only add those projects to the portfolio. Also think about how understandable is it. Don't use too much of jargons. It's an assumption where people think that adding a jargon basically reflects that you know a lot of things, but that's not true. Being a designer, the only thing that we want, that everything that we are communicating to our end user should be easy and understandable, right? To make everything very simple, talk about initiate only minimal steps in your portfolio, add minimal number of projects in your portfolio. And one very important thing about these recruiters are that they're also human, right? So you need to have a human connect with them. And the way to have that human connect is by basically telling more about yourself. Have a place in your resume or have a place in your portfolio where maybe you can write a few lines about yourself. Tell them about your design journey. What made you pick design as one of the careers? What interests you the most? And maybe mention something about your favorite hobbies, or maybe something, maybe if you have a pet, because that reflects the human value, that reflects the humanness, and basically breaks that barrier where this person will understand that I'm talking to a person, not a static resume or not a static website. Well, once you do that, once you have something in ready, next, when you start having this mindset of making a portfolio, question arises: what kind of what kind of projects can I include in my own portfolio, right? One of the answer is that you need to understand the business behind the product. When I say that, I mean, or I want to restate that as a designer, you are a user advocate. You do your best to make sure the need of a end user is met, but you're also inclined, or you're also responsible towards a company who has employed you, right? Your job is to make sure that this company is earning certain revenue. You have to understand how the business is working. Take an example of a Swiggy. So Swiggy earns money not by selling food, but by delivering it, right? So whenever you're using these projects, these apps, actually think about how these businesses are working. This will help you to come across an idea which can be actually be very beneficial for your own project. For example, maybe late delivery, right? People don't have, a lot of time we each one of us would have faced the same scenario where you have ordered something, it showed initially that it will be delivered in 30 minutes, but it didn't reach you, right? And we experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger when we don't get the food at the right time because we have been waiting for it, right? And this would be area, if this experience goes wrong, you will actually not opt for to order something on Swiggy again. You might go to Zomato or maybe something else. This is a particular factor which actually is affecting the business of the complete company. So think about these kind of problems and maybe make a case study around it. This will basically give you that edge where maybe someone who has basically adding that meaning to the project. So whenever a recruiter from a certain company will look at it, he will understand that this person not only just talk about user, but will also talk about business and will actually be beneficial in my own team. Then times come that what all should we include in the portfolio, right? So whenever you are closing your case study, very important thing is that you must mention the most crucial learning throughout the case study. Uh, Learning as in you can talk about maybe answer basic questions like what went well, what did you like doing this during the complete process, or maybe what you could have done better, maybe given a second chance, or maybe re-looking at the complete case studies, what could have been the single thing that you would have tried doing it again, and what were your learnings around during the complete process of the making that case study. Talk about those learnings, because those learnings are very important. A recruiter might not have enough time to go through each and every step of the case study, but he would certainly look at those learning, which will actually summarize the complete effort made during that meeting, during making that case study. In the end, I would just try to summarize on the complete portfolio wala part that you need to keep it short, keep it sharp, and keep it simple. Try removing all the unnecessary things. Also on the resume, like a lot of time people add, yeah, I won a fancy dress competition in class third, but that does not matter, right? Only thing which matters in the current context, you should think about that. And once you do all those things, you have your portfolio ready, you are actually open to apply for jobs. Right? That's the easiest part of it. You just go to LinkedIn. There are a lot of other websites like that, Naukri and Glassdoor and whatnot. You just start posting your things, and you have to be very you have to be very patient throughout this process, because this process take time. There can be 3 months that someone would might not even look at your portfolio, might not even look at your resume, but they will look at it, because very important part of the complete hiring process that they also want someone, they are looking for designers, right? I would just want to share, just before ending this complete talk, I would just want to share a quick tips upon while while attending an interview. At the core, you have to be very honest. Every time whenever you try to make a story, or maybe take a credit, friend's credit, that someone else did, and you say that this is what I do, the person sitting on the other side, the recruiter, will actually catch it, and no one appreciates that, right? Everyone has that gauge that they understand how much effort has been put and how much effort is required to basically reach a task. Second thing is taking feedback. As a designer, we develop a lot of passion towards a design that are made, and we don't like anyone questioning it. We don't like anyone suggesting any changes to it. But we also need to take feedback, because feedback is the most important part of the design process. Only when your end user is looking at it, he will be able to tell you something that you might not have noticed. So taking that feedback is one of the most important. Accept the feedback, even if there are times that you don't agree to something, gently accept it, and you can say, "Let me come back to you. Let me do my research on this, and I'll get back to you." And third most important part is the being present while attending any of your recruiting process, while attending any of your uh, design interviews. We tend to be we tend to prepare ourselves for next coming question, but what happens during the process, we miss on what's happening right now. So you have to be very good listener throughout your process. Take time, in understanding whatever is being asked, be in the present, and answer only when it's required. You don't need to force your answers as well. To be present in the complete scenario. Yeah, I think this is all I had for today. So this is all that you need, I think, for now. Uh, I'll be happy if you have any questions for anything. Maybe if you want to ask anything on the design and that's how it functions in the industry, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, Manik, so there are some questions in the chat. Maybe we can start with them.
Sure.
One of them is, can you share a little bit about freelancing as a UI UX designer?
Okay. So basically, freelancing or UX. So freelancing is actually, I'll say freelancing looks very easy, and it feels that anyone can do it. But you need to have a very strong passion towards it, because with freelancing, you are not only designing, but you're also working on a business. You have to make your pitches. You have to have a portfolio ready every time, and you have to share it with your clients. So you have to be prepared every time that you can share anything which is completely ready to be shared. And there are a lot of websites which where you can go and post, but these things take time. One drawback I would suggest, where I want to talk about while freelancing, is that you work in a isolation. You are your own team, right? So basically, two things happen when you're working alone. Either you end up doing everything on your own, or you end up doing nothing. You restrict yourself to a particular skill that I do this only, and for anything else, you go out there look for someone else. So when you're freelancing, I would suggest work in groups. For example, maybe the group that you have or at your own college, involve more people. Involving more people will help you get more feedback, look at new perspective, and only then have a better portfolio which will help you crack the freelancing jobs. I hope I was able to give you some context on it.
Uh, yeah, Rutu, if you would like to maybe ask something more on these lines, or if this is
Yeah.
okay, then maybe we can move on to the next one. And the next one is from Google, mentioning, let's say, if someone wants to improve their problem solving skills, how can they do them? Or maybe if there are any online websites which they can refer to and upskill themselves.
Basically, there are a lot of online courses available on problem solving. You can easily Google. There are courses on Coursera. There are certified courses on Google as well. But problem solving is not something which you can directly just read and learn, right? It has to be inbuilt. It has to be inbuilt. You have to think about problem every time. It also can be looked at in a pessimistic way, that you are also always talking about problems, but this is something which is good as well. You have to start looking at problems around you, and very basic problems. Maybe, like for example, you have to wake up early in the morning. How can you maybe solve that? Look for an answer. Maybe one answer could be that maybe start sleeping early. That very simple. But you have to be very passionate about problems first. Think about the problem at every time. Maybe start pinpointing things which are not right, and then only you can look at problem solving and maybe look for those solutions.
Hi, sir. Google here. Can I
Yeah,
add up to my question?
sure. Yeah,
I was the one asking how to improve our problem solving skills.
yeah,
Because as a designer, design decision making is like an exhausting thing for our brain, right, sir? So solving a problem means like it takes a lot of time, or for as a beginner, I'm
yeah.
entirely new, a newbie into this field, UI UX designing. I was so what
So,
I'm asking is like, if you're facing a problem, do you personally have any approach to solve it
so
more
I think
quicker? Or,
what I do is
mm,
that I'll take an example from a regular work that I do. that I've given a problem to maybe work for a user to maybe have a conversion rate or something, right? So
Okay.
the biggest thing to do for problem solving is to understand the user. Because a lot of time problems are not being articulated well.
Yeah.
Someone will say and come and say that this is not right.
Yes.
But to figure out what exactly is not right, you have to go and talk to people. You have to
Yes.
talk to your end user.
Channel
Maybe
actually.
talking about
So,
maybe food delivery, which is the context that I was using throughout. So
okay.
people might not even realize that this is not right, or the why the food is not being delivered at the right time. People might not able to figure out, but you will have to go out there, maybe talk to a rider who's delivering a food,
Okay.
understand what are the hardships that he goes through while delivering a food.
Okay.
That maybe his bike is not of that
Yeah.
state. Maybe maybe he faces regular petrol shortage, or maybe the tire punctures happens, or whatever, or he has to travel to a long distance, or maybe he can tell you very specifically that I was notified at the very last moment. That's why I was not able to do that.
So,
Right?
okay, adding up to that, I have a happy news to share because I've been trying a lot to transit to change my career into something creative. Because
Great, yeah.
later on, I was doing a business development job 2 years back, and after that, finding myself an inner call to do something creative. I tried a lot of things, but after finally, I was decided to stick on to UI UX designing, and Monday I am joining in a new company, which I
Great,
have
yeah.
signed my employment offer letter today.
Great, yeah.
This Monday,
Congratulations.
28th, I will be joining as a UI designer. This is my first job. So,
Congratulations, yeah. Congratulations.
thank you so much, sir.
I would advise you to ask a lot of questions while you're working there.
Yeah,
The
because,
thing that you
yeah,
want to work in problem solving, one of the
yes, sir.
ways to ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of
Actually,
questions.
my company is a fintech company. What I
Yeah,
found about that industry is like even every person is using a mobile app for banking right now, but no one is happy with the in user interface or the experience of using a banking app.
yeah,
So
I agree
yeah,
to it.
there are a lot of problems to solve in that field. Uh, there are a
Great,
lot
yeah.
of issues
Congratulations.
not
And I
being
think
solved. Yeah,
you are actually you're starting a great journey. Congratulations.
yeah. So that's why I asked you that specific question about how to improve our problem solving skills. I know
My
it
answer
can be
would
only done in a long term process. I know, but still, I was asking like, do you have any personal?
there is actually
Uh,
no specific formula to it. Problem solving,
yeah.
like I said, it's a very intuitive thing. The only answer here is that you need to go out and talk to the people who are facing that problem. Because
Mhm.
the only problem with problem solving is that the problem is not articulated right.
Yeah.
So just do that, and I'm very sure the more you will interact with people, you will start finding those answers.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, so moving on to the next one. So the next one is by Anirudh, and it's a pretty big one. He says, when can I think that I am prepared for applying for a job? What all things are must to have in terms of learning, courses, portfolio, or in terms of practice?
Okay. Hmm, I'll say it's a process. Okay, you will realize that you are ready to do it. But there are few things that should, like I mentioned, that at least have 3 projects in your portfolio. And when like you're since you'll be applying for a profession for a fresher job, so obviously the expectation would not be that high. So maybe even if you have decent amount of UI skills, it will still function. But uh, like you need, it would be good if you can get some kind of a 3 month or 6 month UI course done, UI UX course done. It's not a mandatory, but it will help you to understand the terms that are being used during the design process. Uh, and like I said, at least 3 projects in your portfolio. And yeah, I think that's it. Pretty much that only. And then I'll say start applying, and the moment you will start getting calls, you'll, like I said, start taking that your recruiter as your own end user, you will start understanding how do they think. Maybe after 3 to 4 interviews, you'll have a better idea that what are the things that they want to listen to, what is the language that they talk into, and that's it. I think this is not what you required, and some patience. These things take time. It will take at least 3 months to prepare yourself for this.
Yeah, so here's the next one. So this is what is the difference between UI and UX, and can you please explain this with an example, with a in-world example?
Yeah, sure. So UX is basically, like I said, talking more about the user, understanding the pain points of it, and basically enabling him to complete his task. I've been constantly taking an example of food deliveries. So let's talk about that itself. So for example, as a user, I'm someone who's hungry and who want to order a food, right? And usually, this kind of action happens when you're actually quite hungry. You don't want to wait for it. So the only process that I want to that our user is concerned to is ordering the food. So what are the steps involved? He would want to look at the food. He want to select something. He would want to make his decision if the food is matching his taste palette or not. If the food is something that he really wants to eat or not. If the price matches or not. And then how much time will it take it to deliver to his place? When these things are answered, he goes to the next step where he select a payment option, and there are again more steps involved, like which payment option to select, is there any offer running. So basically the UX talk about the complete journey at every step, what what the user's process will be, and how can we simplify it, how can we make it. For example, when I was talking about it, I was able to pinpoint about 7 to 8 different steps, but you won't even realize while ordering a food, you will feel that it's just maximum 2 to 3 steps. that is the that is what a UX designer does, making the process as simple as possible to the end user. Similarly, UI designer actually complements the UX designer. The work of a UI designer is to basically make sure all this information is visible to the person at the right time with the right emphasis. For example, if I'm ordering a food, and I want to see if I really want it or not, so what are the data points that I would require to, or to make that decision? Maybe rating, maybe feedback if anyone is given on it, or the photograph, or and the price, right? So the work of a UI designer would be to first of all make sure that everything is very easily accessible to the user. Everything is in a close proximity, and it's helping the user to make that decision. Basically, declutter things. The things which are not required, he will remove that. Make sure if the image is of the most priority, so he'll make sure that image is big enough, all the information is readable enough, and also at the last point, his work would be to add the little delight factor, which basically makes the journey engaging and makes the user come back to the platform again. So yeah, this is what very specifically UI and UX designer does. I hope I was able to answer the desired way.
Yeah, it was really helpful. So the next one is, in your opinion, is it preferable to learn UX design before learning UI design?
Basically, it depends on your aspiration. Both are complementing, but yet quite independent. And also depends on the organization. If you're particularly looking for a job, for example, if you talk of startups, so at startups they don't have enough budget to have dedicated people for dedicated roles, so they prefer someone who have knowledge of both, who can do a little bit of UX and a little bit of UI. But companies like Airtel or maybe Microsoft or Google, who are big enterprise, who have enough budgets, they prefer having different teams, because obviously people who have very specific skills will actually produce good quality of work, right? So it completely depends on the preference, where your preference lies. If you really like UI designing, go ahead, no problem, do that. There is no dependency on UX. Similarly, if you like UX design, no problem, you can go ahead with that, and maybe just work on a company where you have different dedicated rules for it.
Yeah, so the next one is from Amit. So he's asking how to switch from a graphic designer into UI UX designer.
Great, yeah. So actually, to be frank, switching from a graphic designer to a UX designer is not that complicated, uh, because the core design process is quite similar. But when you are designing a graphic, you always have a end user in your mind, that for whom you are making it, for what is the communication that you want to make, and what do you want user to do in the end, what as in the action that he wants to perform. It's very similar to what UX or UI UX design process looks like. Only thing that you would need more to understand is a little bit about the, at the very basic, the guidelines, that what all guidelines are being used while designing for a mobile screen, or maybe a Windows, or a laptop screen. What kind of spacing, what kind of fonts, what kind of typography to be addressed to, which is quite easy to understand. Next would be understanding the complete workflow as in, which can easily be learned by looking at the current apps that you use itself. Workflow as in the process, like just start thinking of the process which is happening whenever you are performing any job. For example, if you are even paying someone, so you go and open your app, you scan a QR or maybe enter a phone number, you verify that this is the right person, get it cross checked, and then you make sure you enter your pin, and then you pay, right? To understand these process would be one of the keys that you will have to work on, which is again not very difficult to learn. That's it. I don't think there is any more things required. I personally believe there are people in my team who have switched from a graphic design to a UX job and doing tremendous job.
Okay, so someone is asking your thoughts about transitioning from making a career transition at the age of 37 with no design degree or experience.
Okay, that's, I think that's something which is quite possible. Don't think that it's not something which maybe people would not accept. But specifically when I talk about design, like I said, in design we don't look for any specific degree to be there. We only look at the kind of work being produced. But one thing that you will have to maybe work on is the introspection. Like I said, you will have to ask that why do you want to switch to UI UX, because you will be asked a lot of times during your interview that at this point of your life, when people start maybe thinking of settling down at a job, you're trying a new thing. Why do you want to do that? There are always a push and pull. Push is something which pushes you to leave your current comfort zone and look for a new opportunity, which can be the UX design in your case. And pull is something which is attracting you there. Think about those things. Think about, introspect a lot. Think about why do you want to really do it. And if you have those answers and a right skill, I am very sure no one will ask for a degree. No one will ask for your age. Just have a good portfolio in place.
Yeah, so there's another one. As a designer, are we expected to know the basics of front-end development?
No, that's not a mandatory thing. That's something which is good to have, which basically it enables you to talk to your developers, so that whatever design you are making is communicated in the right way and in the end developed in the right way. But this is something which is not mandatory. Uh, so like I know a bit of coding myself, that's why it helps me. Otherwise, it's completely fine. People who don't know, there are always someone or the other to help it. So it's not, you can completely avoid that if not necessary.
Okay, maybe we can take a last couple of questions before we call
Sure,
this
not a
session
problem.
off.
Yeah.
So one of the last one is, what are the projects UX designer does work on apart from a website?
Okay. So basically UX designers are very independent of the platform. Like I said, their core work is to understand user and create a process or create a step which is very usable for a person and enables them to complete their work. Having said that, it makes you very independent of any kind of platform. So UX designer can design for a mobile phone, they can design for a website, they can design for ATM machines. I myself have designed for ATM machines. I have designed for card machines, the Android POS machines. I am currently designing for large screen TVs. So the possibilities are endless because UX designers are never restricted to a particular medium.
Okay, I believe there are no more questions as of now. If in case, if anyone of you would like to unmute yourself and directly interact with Maanik, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, let's call
Yeah,
this.
thank you. Thank you so much, Maanik and the other ADP list members. It's been a great opportunity, and I really appreciate how Maanik has summed up UX, UI in such a beautiful manner, because I've been watching videos on YouTube and all the other platforms. And, it's been like 6 months, but it was so to the point and so crisp that, anyone for the first time who's listening to this, it will be like, you will understand every aspect of it. I mean, it was so to the point. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
organizing
glad that
this.
I was helpful.
I highly appreciate it.
I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that. Thank you.
Welcome.
So you can obviously reach out to me in case you have any more questions. I'm available on LinkedIn, or maybe you can also go to ADPList, and if you want to book one-on-one session with me, I'll be happy to answer. So it's okay if you don't have any questions right now. Maybe take some time, and you can always reach out to me.
Athar, so should we call it an off, or are we expecting any more questions?
I think we can call it off now. So there's one last question. So what is the ideal guideline I can follow for web and app design, such as artboard size responsiveness?
Okay. So ideally, there are a lot of guidelines available online. There is one from Google Material. You can obviously go to their website and do that. Because it completely, like I said, it's completely depends on the medium that you're using. If you're designing for a Android phone, standard say 360 by 640 height, and then there are 16 pixel gutter and all. So I'm not sure if I should actually tell you those pixel perfection or not. But very frankly, you can go to the Google Material Design website. There's a guideline which is almost followed by every other product online, maybe website or app. And there is also a guidelines. Let me get, just give me a second. I'll just share the link. Yeah, so there is human interface guidelines from Apple, which basically talks about their guidelines, which is very similar to what Google also have. You can maybe use this link to look at. Can I send this to all? Yeah, can send this to all. So you can maybe use this link to look at what guidelines is Apple present. And material guidelines, I think, is easily available online. You can just Google material design guidelines. It's there.
So just to add on to it, I believe in any software that they will be doing, for example, Figma or anything else.
Yeah.
So they usually have artbook designs there for particular categories. Let's say if you want to develop a screen for, let's say, Apple
iPhone or something. Yeah. So
yeah,
basically,
so you
start. It's similar to when you like creating a a sketchboard in Photoshop. You go and select what kind of medium you want to select. You also have option to select A4 size sheets, documents, presentations, desktop screens. What that will give you at least the size. If what should be the artboard size, they can directly give you. But if you talk about guidelines, as in how much should be the font sizes, how much spacing should be follow, how much should be the tab areas, and button heights, how the interaction should function, those things can be easily found at the link that I've shared from Apple, and then the material guidelines as well.
Okay, I believe that's all from the Q&A side. Thanks a lot, Manik, for taking out time from your schedule to have a session here. And I believe definitely the audience members would have learned a lot about your experiences as well as how they can start their career in UI UX and what are the fundamentals and other details for it.
Great, yeah, I'm really happy that I was helpful. And like I said, I really like doing these kind of things. But if you have any questions, anything, please feel free to reach out. I'll be happy if I can help any one of you. And thanks, Utpal, for this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks Manik, thanks Atharva, and thank you all for attending. So let's call it off for today.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Bye all. Bye.